For more than a century, the movies have brought our most vivid nightmares to life. Often, the fear is conjured from fantasy, from imagining the unimaginable. But it's even more frightening when the demons are real.
Based on a true story. Just that small phrase that these events actually happened sort of makes the film much more both relevant and much more terrifying.
Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. Each of these characters had its origins in the same true story, the unspeakable crimes of a single man. His name was Ed Gein.
The writers of fiction, who are really good at it, could take Ed Gein and you could make him almost anything you wanted to make him in the world of horror, because he had so much to work with.
Gein's crimes were committed against the living and the dead. The depraved acts of a damaged mind, they slashed through the surface of a complacent age, revealing the darkness that lurked just below. His twisted world became America's obsession. And what is at bottom the story of a boy and his mother became the template for half a century of horror.
There's something about Gein that appeals to the morbid curiosity within all of us. It's so macabre, so bizarre, so deviant that we can't look away.
How long have you known Mr. 7 years? 7 years. What kind of a man did you know him as? Well, a man, he's a nice man, just like anybody else. The only difference I'd say in the man, he seems to be a little hot.
No one ever claimed that Plainfield, Wisconsin was a small-town paradise. In the fall of 1957, it was home to about 700 people, a quiet, hard-working place on the windswept flatlands of central Wisconsin.
They had the main hardware store for that area, a food market. They had a restaurant or two, a saloon. There was nothing that would distinguish it from, probably 100 other communities in Wisconsin.
That all changed over the course of one cold weekend, with a mysterious disappearance and a shocking discovery. Saturday, November 16th marked the beginning of an annual Wisconsin ritual. Deer season. In Plainfield, the men hunted not for sport, but for food. Their trophies would be killed, hung in barns, and dressed out, gutted and butchered.
All the males would be out in the woods. And so the main street would be a quiet place.
Particularly quiet that morning was Bernice Warden's hardware store. Though the store was supposed to be open, the 58-year-old proprietor was nowhere to be found.
I lived across the street from the hardware store where Bernice Warden ran her business. I believe it was in the afternoon. People were starting to wonder why the store was locked and where was Bernice Warden.
So her son came back from deer hunting himself and found that the place was a mess. There was blood all over the floor, and they started to investigate what might have possibly happened to her.
Interviewed by police, Bernice Warden's son mentioned a frequent customer who'd been in just the day before to check on the price of antifreeze. Ed Gein, a 51-year-old bachelor who lived in an isolated farmhouse outside of town.
Everybody had a role to play in this town. And I think that Ed Gein was recognized probably not as the village idiot, but as a village oddball, I would say.
That evening, about 2 hours after Bernice Warden was reported missing, Sheriff Art Sly headed out with another deputy to Ed Gein's farm.
If you ever wanted to have a Halloween party, that would be a great place for it. It was a spooky house out in the edge of town, and it was dark, and there wasn't a sign of life there.
The doors of the house were locked, so the officers decided to take a look inside the woodshed.
They went in investigating with flashlights. It was pitch black because there was no electricity and no lights. And one of the lawmen felt something bump against his shoulder. He turned, shined his flashlight on it, and indeed, there was Bernice Warden hanging from the rafters, upside down with her head off and gutted like a deer.
Ed Gein was taken into custody that night. As he sat quietly in his cell at the Washara County Jail, police continued to search his woodshed and then cautiously ventured into his home. Inside, they would discover a horrific scene. Bernice Warden's gutted carcass, it turned out, was only Ed Gein's latest grim creation. On November 16, 1957, the quiet farming town of Plainfield, Wisconsin was abuzz with rumors about the murder of one of its residents. Bernice Warden's mutilated and decapitated corpse had been found that night in the woodshed of 51-year-old Ed Gein.